what your role is here at the U of I.
Okay, I'm Susann Sears, and my job title is Disability Specialist.
Mm-hmm.
So that entails 3 major job responsibilities. The first one is determining eligibility for services for students with physical or health disabilities, and do the initial intake if they qualify for services. Then I determine which reasonable accommodations for in-class and exams. And then we write a letter of accommodation based on those needs. The second role, I serve as a liaison with the career services. I also deal a lot with career transition, which makes sense because Dr. Strasser probably talks a lot about, even though you're in the medical aspects class, that he talks about the vocational piece as well. And I'm also, of course, a part-time PhD student, and he's my advisor. The third thing I do is I serve as the liaison with the Study Abroad office. So any student registered here that is thinking about studying abroad, we meet and discuss what kinds of accessibility issues, cultural implications that would come with choosing a specific study abroad program. So that's kind of an overview, and then of course other tasks assigned when they come up.
Busy all the time. Okay, just getting into the topic at hand. Publications rank U of I #1 in terms of disability accommodations. What has the university done actually to gain that ranking?
Well, being the oldest program in disability services and higher education, not only in the United States but globally, has given us a lot more time proportionally than other campuses to really get a good understanding of what works well programmatically, and having a presence for that many years. Eventually, at some point, we're probably going to maybe be a little bit ahead of the curve in relation to other campuses with the attitudinal piece. But don't get me wrong, the attitudinal piece, there is so much more that we need to do to work on the social inclusion piece as well. We need to continually look at improving upon what we have currently, and I think I've sort of hit that home, as a topic of discussion when I've filled in for medical aspects. I think one of the areas that has made us distinctive, not only for the physical accessibility piece, but the retention piece on this campus, and that's through our cognitive and psychological disability services. I think I talked a little bit about this before, where if a student comes in to the U of I, has a lot of academic difficulties, is not performing up to their aptitude in terms of their true capabilities, they're struggling, they can undergo what is called an academic screening. And I think maybe Dr. Collins talked a little bit about that, maybe on Friday or Thursday's class in medical aspects, maybe not. But there's a screening process that students can take part in if they're encountering academic difficulties, never been previously diagnosed with any kind of disability condition. And based on the screening process, if they need further testing, then they come here to Dres and they'll do the 6 to 8 hour assessment. And based on the results, if they have to do the neuropsych testing, if there is a diagnosed condition, then we start them immediately into services.
Okay.
Sometimes they do go through all of the testing, they determine that they don't have a diagnosis, so then we'll refer them on to other offices that would be able to work with them to address whatever concerns they have. So I think that's an additional component of our service provision that's very unique when you compare our services to other campuses, in addition to the physical accessibility of the campus.
And how long the accommodations are going on?
I think close to 10 years, maybe not quite 10 years. We've been doing that service. So, yeah.
Just off the top of your head, what do you consider some just glaring architectural barriers that you've noticed around campus?
There's definitely a few. I alluded to, some of the classrooms that have stairs-only access. I think that when, for example, some of the doors are heavier than, it might be accessible to get in the room, but students can't physically pull the doors open. That's not really true independence when you have to rely on a surrogate to hold the door for you. And then when, let's say, a power door or something happens to like those big auditorium rooms, that really creates a snowball effect, so to speak. Like one year, the Alsgeld 314 classroom, which I think that's an elevator. You got to obviously take the elevator up. There was issues with that elevator, and I probably had about 10 students that used that class for different reasons, and we had to rearrange and scramble that first initial week of the semester because students kept coming in, I can't get to class, I can't get to class. So when something happens to one particular auditorium room with an elevator-only access, it can create this whole snowball effect.
Okay.
I have a quick question about the stadium.
Uh-huh.
What do you think about the stadium setup, like the football stadium, because it's very inaccessible?
Well, you know, they did the whole renovation the last couple of years, and where the students have to sit, they could have designed it so that students were better integrated into the student section, where they're still on that platform that's separate from the band and that's separate from the Orange Crush area.
Mm-hmm.
They could have done a better job with that, in my opinion. So, yep, and that was a brand new renovation.
Mm-hmm.
But
Okay. This also kind of helps lead to the next question, which is we have a lot of new buildings being built all around campus, but a lot of them aren't necessarily handicap accessible to begin with. So we just want to know what your opinion is on retrofitting campus buildings that are just, have been recently built as opposed to being accessible in the first place.
Well, that's something. The big thing concern I have is when architects are trained, they're not always trained in the area. I mean, clearly, they don't consider the ADA accessibility. They also are under the assumption that if you were to put accessibility into the design, that it's going to be ugly, too. It does not have to be ugly. It actually is better if you incorporate accessibility from the blueprint level and then to see it come to fruition when you actually build the infrastructure of the building. If it's done properly, it'll look seamless with the actual design, and it actually is better for everybody, no matter who you are. If it's built accessible, I mean, who wants to shovel off stairs or walk upstairs when it's slippery out? Nobody does. You're more likely to slip and fall. So that's something that I don't know where we're still struggling with that, I guess you could say, in terms of the architecture, the educational component of training architects is still.
So that's just something very broad that's going to probably take a little bit of time.
I don't know, and unfortunately, with laws, it's the regulations that really push laws. It's not the law itself, and unfortunately, there's not a lot of regulations behind architectural standards and the different tiers of architectural, standards. The minimum requirements really don't do much for anybody, but they're still in compliance with the law.
Thank you. Does the university have any say in regards to buildings on this campus that it doesn't necessarily belong to the university, like Green Street restaurants or apartment complexes? Do they have any recommendations to accommodate students with disabilities, or is that just completely separate from what the university can do in terms of involvement?
I think if students were, we don't have, that, again, it's separate from the university, but if the students were to say something or question something, and a bunch of people walked out and said, we're not going to eat here, I think then that would probably impact, because it's a business, and with the business, you have to have consumers to drive the money, and if they're losing a bunch of money, then they might probably reconsider that. Like we talked before too, the one student sits in the back who does know has a lot of acquaintances on the wheelchair basketball team because she's on the team as well. They just simply deal with things day to day because they're used to having to do this. So they carry each other up the stairs or whatever with their able-bodied friends. It's not necessarily addressing the issue. If they were all to get together and stand on the sidewalk together and say, hey, we're not coming here, that might be a little more impactful than. But again, it's one of those things where you have to sort of balance what you're going to argue from day to day.
Okay. If a person with a disability has any concerns, say with if there's snow on the sidewalk and they can't cross the street or something, can they use treads as an outlet to the university?
Yes. Yes, we have a facilities and services office, same office that runs the buses that run that go on the campus in addition to the MTV.
Okay.
That same office, if there's issues with certain sidewalks or areas, students need to call in, and then we'll contact the proper people, whether it's city or university jurisdiction. Regardless, we'll work with the right entities to get that removed or taken care of.
We're almost done here. Just two more quick questions. Just within the past 5 years, what would you say would be some improvements the university has done to accommodate students with disabilities?
I think, the whole Nugent Hall initiative is a really good, visible thing. And we've even been sort of criticized for that because the students don't have non-disabled roommates in that first floor. There's been some questions, but again, that frustrates me professionally because there are not even campuses that are even beginning to address these issues in the first place. So how can you be productive criticism if you've never even touched the issue of PAs on campus whatsoever? A lot of campuses just simply say you're on your own, you have to do this on your own if you want to be here, So they may get involved if it has to do with building security, another given campus, to let that PA in and out because they don't actually maybe reside there. And so there's issues of that's probably the extent that any other campuses typically get involved.
At the same time, we're actually still getting criticized for what we've done and how much, or what we can do when there's other schools.
And everybody's gonna face criticism no matter what you do. But I think we're doing a great thing, and that's taking it to the next level. And then maybe in the next 10 to 15 years, we can start looking at taking it to another level beyond that. To me, it's a gradual process that you have to, when you're the only campus that's doing something that's progressive, you got to figure out what works best and doesn't work best, and keep building upon it and keep making improvements over the course of time. That does not come overnight.
You mentioned this earlier with social inclusion, but what improvements can the university continue to make to ensure their #1 ranking for accommodations for students with disabilities?
I think anytime we look at registered student organizations and things that are definitely student-driven, that students take an active role in that social inclusion piece. And that's not to say that you're going to know all the answers to all the questions or different implications that come up, but really understanding the resources that are around you, coming here, talking to us. We have a campus life office here that can work with the non-academic social inclusion piece, as well as any of the administrators here can address those sorts of things. I think certainly, the student organization piece, let me think. I know that some of the students want to do the rush process as well, so looking at those to the interfraternity council and things like that. We are, I think, the sorry about the window, first campus on written record who had a student with a physical disability complete the rush process and then join a sorority. And that was back in 1985 or 86 in that area.
Okay.
But not to say there wasn't another chair user prior to her, but she was the first one on written record to go through that process. But I think there still needs to be continual discussion in that area too.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And one more thing, actually, if you can get this, just looking at incorporating disability into the diversity piece as well. There are distinctive lip differences. Disability intersects all genders, races, sexual orientation as well. So it's the highest minority population in the United States, but yet there's still a lot of things that are misunderstood about the area of disability. So we got to keep continually having thoughtful discussions and dialogue and looking at the physical, programmatic, and attitudinal pieces.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
We're just glad you were able to fit us in.
Oh, no, that's fine.